right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this February 27th, 2024 meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. A couple of reminders for everybody here at the top of the meeting. This is an excellent time to silence your phones or devices if you haven't done so already. This meeting and its participants are being recorded. This evening, there will be several opportunities for public comment. If you wish to comment, please do so at the podium and the microphone so that you can be heard in this room and on the live stream. And so that everyone is aware, the microphone is very sensitive, so you don't have to eat it or anything like that. Comments must begin with your name and block of residence for the meeting record and should be addressed toward council. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and should address issues that have or may come before council as legislation. To keep time, you will see this light here in front of me turn green as the speaker begins. It will turn yellow when there is 1 minute remaining, and it will turn red when 3 minutes has been exhausted. I thank you all in advance for allowing equal time for all of our speakers this evening. One more announcement tonight. Resolution number 11, 2024 that appeared on this meeting's agenda is not yet ready to be presented to council. We will not take it up tonight, but it will be on a future meeting of council. And now, for all of those who are willing and able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Harris, if you would, could you please call the roll of members?
Yes, Madam President. Mr. Ahmed.
Here.
Mr. Arroyo.
Here.
Mr. Glees.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Mr. Hirsch.
Here.
And President Baker.
Here. Our next item is the approval of the minutes of the February 13th, 2024 meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the meeting minutes. Are there any council comments on them? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Ahmed.
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Mr. Glees.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Hirsch.
Aye.
And President Baker.
Aye. The next item on our agenda is proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. I don't believe we have any this evening. Is that correct, Mr. Harris?
That is correct. We do not.
Thank you very much. Then that will bring us to our first public comment period. It's reserved for residents who have contacted the city clerk prior to the meeting to request an opportunity to speak to council. Again, duration of comments is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and I will use this light to keep time. Please begin with your name and your block of residence for the meeting record. Mr. Harris, do we have any pre-registered public comments this evening?
We do. First is James Morrissey.
Good evening, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Morrissey, would you make sure the button on the microphone is green?
There's a green light. Just make sure you see that. There we go. Perfect.
Start the clock over, right?
I did. Go right ahead.
Jim Morrissey, 39 Washington Street in Old Town. The subject tonight that I'm speaking to is the Southeast Lancaster Street Improvement Plan. On February 6, 39 residents from Old Town sent a letter via email to Emma Han. Reply was given early in the week, but as of today, 21 days later, no reply. I sent an email to Emma Han and all of you, by the way, the council, on February 12th, raising concerns and facts that contradict the recommendations of the consultant. As of today, no response except one from Councilwoman Diaz. Thank you. Angled versus parallel parking. Every study I've seen so far in major states and cities regarding hundreds of miles of parking spaces and spots and so forth have shown that accident rates are higher under angled parking versus parallel parking, including the Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, where they have said parallel parking is preferred. The consultants seem to be contradicting all the data that I've come across. If they have other data, I'd love to see it. That prove me wrong. Lancaster City website, tourism plan focusing on history. Part of the history of the city is those properties. that reflect the national historic value and so forth. And I suggest that the Southeast project really contradicts these goals. Defacing the view of buildings in Old Town is really counter to the HARB objectives and the PA Secretary of the Interior standards, and in addition to lowering our property values. But I want to mention HARB for a moment, because HARB also will say that sidewalks, for example, which would be ripped up on the project on the north side of Church Street, are not under the purview of HARB. Well, I think maybe there's a misinterpretation of the Secretary's standards, which say that any change that will affect the appearance of the building or overall character of the street, to me, that includes sidewalks. In fact, it specifically mentions landscaping. It's covered by those standards, and sidewalks are generally accepted as part of the landscaping. Bicycle lanes, I haven't figured out some of these bicycle lanes. I rode around the city today. They start nowhere, they end nowhere. It's kind of like the bridges from and to nowhere. There's no loop that completes the cycle. I'm not even sure why they're used. But also today, I saw 3 cyclists on Lemon Street. Interesting. Next to the bike lane, right? One person using, the other 2 were just going up the middle of the street competing with traffic. So I'm not even sure what the value of the lanes is anyway. The consultants, how much were they paid? I don't expect any answers today, but perhaps if I ever get an answer or other members of the community get answers to their emails, we'll find out. However, did they, in their studies, refer to the National Association of Highway and Transportation Officials? Is there anything in those reports that they just kind of glided over? I don't know. I'd like to know. Consultants are always going to make recommendations. They're never going to say to you for $100,000, you're doing everything perfectly. I don't know. I know. I was a consultant once, and I hate to admit it. So I think maybe there needs to be a lot more done, and certainly I would appreciate if somebody could give us answers to our many questions. We have many incidences of correspondence not being answered. One more?
You have reached 3 minutes.
Well, I just want to say that the neighbors in Old Town seem to be constantly fighting the battle of the wrecking ball, either the city, and I think we're getting a little bit weary of what's going on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Harris, our next pre-registered public comment.
Next is Tony Dastra.
Good evening, Mr. Dastra.
Good evening, council. All right, so coincidentally, this is about bike lanes.
You could just start with your name and talk.
Yes, I forgot about that. Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. So after the last snowstorm, went to use the bike lane a day or so later, found it wasn't cleared. Public Works is a challenge, I understand that. Capacity is an issue, fair. Hadn't been cleared days later, put in a fix-it request, and at that point, the bike lanes did get the little scooper through, but they were still covered in ice 4 days later. It took about a week for the protected bike lanes to get cleared. The ones that were out in the street were okay. It's because they had some salt exposure. The ones that had sunlight were fine. This is frustrating to me because these lanes were installed to protect people, and frankly, when I went in it, it became a massive hazard. I did not know that they were going to be this icy for this long. I kept checking in on them. I'm very upset with the response, but, you know, I understand snow hasn't happened for a while. Call it a mulligan. In any case, though, my frustration has compounded because I did a ride with some city folk, recommending changes to the bike lane, and I was made re-aware. I knew this previously, but I wasn't thinking about it, that when someone parks in the bike lane, the protected bike lane, there's nothing we can do about it because state law says that they have to be 12 inches from the curb. That's a level of irony for me that has frustrated me deeply in context of other subjects. So yeah, Title 75, Section 3354 dictates that a vehicle must be within 12 inches of a bike lane. And I think that's why Philadelphia is installing hardline curbs for their future bike lane projects, is because it legally allows them to have these protections. But moral of the story is we either got to close them if they're going to be iced over for this long. We got to make sure we do better in the future because biking for people is sometimes their everyday option. And I'm just deeply frustrated and felt like I needed to vent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dastra. Mr. Harris, we have additional speakers.
Next is Ted Nichols.
Good evening, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you. Ted Nichols, North Londonderry Township, President of the Lancaster County Bird Club and part of Bird Safe South Central PA. At the Planning Commission's suggestion, I stand before you tonight asking for your leadership and support in championing an ordinance that mandates bird safe glass in new construction in Lancaster City. The imminent construction of the 20-story all-glass mosaic building serves as a catalyst for this plea. We are presented with a unique opportunity to merge progress with environmental responsibility. This moment is pivotal, and your collective role can be instrumental in aligning progress with environmental stewardship. As of now, there are no building permits issued for this project. As Willow Valley moves forward with their permitting process, I urge you to explore ways to use your authority to push them to be responsible and use bird-safe glass in their construction. Despite getting a front page story in LNP in May, to date, Willow Valley has been non-responsive to our communications. In fact, they have recently started to try and suppress public discourse on the issue through the deletion and hiding of comments on their social media platforms. Lancaster County sits in the heart of the Atlantic Flyway, a critical migratory pathway for birds. The transparent nature of standard glass poses a grave threat, resulting in up to 1 billion bird fatalities annually in the United States and Canada. That's 1 billion. Glass in its traditional form is becoming the DDT of the 21st century, inflicting severe harm on our avian populations. City Council and the Mayor must confront this urgent need to adopt a bird-friendly building ordinance to address future development in the city of Lancaster. Cities like New York and Washington, D.C. have already implemented such measures successfully, proving that bird conservation and sustainable development can work hand in hand. By incorporating such measures as patterned or fritted glass, we can significantly reduce bird collisions and enhance the overall ecological value of our urban landscape. This initiative is about more than protecting our avian friends. It's about holistic sustainability. As leaders dedicated to guiding the city's future, your role is crucial in shaping its future. Thanks to science, we know and understand how to fix this problem, but leadership at levels such as yours is needed to enact change. I urge you to explore this matter further, consult with bird conservation experts, and engage with stakeholders. Let's set a precedent for responsible development and environmental conservation, making Lancaster City a beacon of progress. The local bird conservation community stands ready to support you in any way we can. In closing, I thank you for your time and consideration. Your roles in city government hold immense potential to shape the future of Lancaster City in a way that respects both our environment and builds on the city's admirable progress on climate, sustainability, and green infrastructure initiatives. I'll add, if you get the argument that bird-safe glass too much, please visit Mosaic Lancaster City Citizens for Bird Safe Glass on Facebook. 0.4% would be the increase to most buildings constructed. It's minimal change to make a difference. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Nichols, thank you for your time. Mr. Harris, we have additional speakers this evening.
We do. Next is Mary Ann Cullen.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ann Motter Cullen. I live at 407 Church Street, and I'm here to lend my full support for the comments of Ted Nichols. I urge you to require bird-safe glass in all future constructions as well as at the Mosaic, because this will also support your goals that you have set out in your urban forest plan. And one of the purposes of developing an urban forest is to protect wildlife habitat. And it would also align with the goals of other organizations like the Lancaster Conservancy, who also seek to protect nature and wildlife. Now, recently you did invest in a consultant to develop a master tourism plan. And I could safely say that if there are dead birds dropping from the sky and littering the sidewalks, I doubt that this will present a favorable image of Lancaster to the tourists that you're trying to attract. Thank you very much.
Ms. Cullen, thank you. Mr. Harris, are there further speakers this evening?
Yes, next is Bettina Hefner.
Good evening, Ms. Hefner.
Good evening. I'm Bettina Hefner. I live in the 200 block of West King Street, and I'm also a member of the Lancaster County Bird Club, and I'm here to speak very briefly in support of Ted Nichols. I'm thinking right now of a fellow Pennsylvanian, Rachel Carson, and her book Silent Spring, which sounded the alarm about the devastation that the pesticide DDT had on the avian population. DDT was eventually banned. Rachel Carson left a legacy for us to deal with issues such as bird collisions. 1 billion die annually in North America of collisions. So conservation and habitat creation alone cannot save our birds. We need to deal with the glass. This is something we know how to fix. To do so, we need local government to be part of the solution. Lancaster is a thriving city. We're a welcoming city. We have the designation of being an age-friendly city. Why not be a bird-friendly city as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hefner. Mr. Harris, further comments?
Yes, next is Meredith Lombard.
Good evening, Council. My name is Meredith Lombard. I am from East Donegal Township in Columbia. I have been a volunteer observer for the Pennsylvania Game Commission since 2007. Since that time, I have observed peregrine falcon nesting activity at various locations in Lancaster County and beyond. As you may know, in 1973, peregrine falcons, along with bald eagles and other apex predators, were put on the endangered species list because the side effects of the insecticide DDT, widely used after World War II, had affected the reproduction capabilities of these birds of prey. In the 1970s and 80s, a group of dedicated volunteers established breeding programs which brought back these apex species from the brink of extinction. My voluntary job was to locate and monitor peregrine falcon nest sites and report activity to the peregrine falcon coordinator for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. In 2019, peregrines were removed from the endangered species list, and in 2021 were removed from the threatened species list. For the next several years, however, they are being monitored to make sure the species has recovered sufficiently and human intervention is no longer needed. I still report my sightings to the Game Commission. There is a pair of peregrine falcons that have called Lancaster City their winter home for the last 12 years or so. They frequently roost on the Marriott building or on the Grice building downtown. They may eventually be found nesting within the city limits. A peregrine falcon primarily eats other birds. They catch their prey by chasing it in level flight or by diving at it from a great height at excessive speed, and they catch it with their feet. Peregrines can fly faster than any other known species. In level light, they can match highway speed, 50 to 60 miles per hour. They are the Superman of the bird world. But unlike Superman, they can't crash through a building or bounce off the ground and remain unharmed. Peregrines have their kryptonite, glass. They cannot see clear or reflective glass. They will chase their prey right into a window. Their prey can't see glass either. And the long road to recovery will have another setback as glass has claimed yet another victim. Don't let clear glass or reflective glass be the DDT of the 21st century. Glass kills birds because birds can't see clear or reflective glass. It was a long road to recovery to bring back the species. Human intervention is again needed. We need to make their environment habitable for the long term. Please recommend bird-safe glass in new building construction. Thank you.
Ms. Lombard, thank you very much. Mr. Harris, are there additional comments?
There are. Next is Dave Costarella.
Did see him. There he is. Good evening, Mr. Costello.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I'm Dave Costarella, 900 block of First Street. I do hand-up partners with the cleaning crews of the homeless, and I do my people on the streets where I feed them every night.
The microphone's very sensitive. You can back up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's hear it. Thank you. Go
Is
right
that good? Okay, sorry. Okay, I wanted to give you a report how many people I'm feeding recently. 56 on Sunday night, ranges from 44 to 50, some that are sleeping on the streets after 9:30. They're out there, and we need to rethink what we're doing, please. The Hand Up Partners thing, we have, when we do our group cleanups, the last one on the 24th, we had 35 people walk from all over town, homeless people, walk from all over town to come and walk 6 to 8 blocks, picking up trash for an hour and a half, gladly for $20. That should change the way we think of who our population is, how to motivate them, and just a brand new way to think these people are not lazy. They would love something to do, and they would love to be productive if we put our heads and find ways to do that. Okay, other than that, we expect them to change. We expect them to change their lives, be productive, get up out of the dirt, and change what they've been doing and do the things that'll get them a new life. And I'd love to see that. But we are using tools that don't work and a system that's not working. And I've seen it for the last 8 years, and it doesn't seem like we're capable of changing. And if we're not capable of changing with all of the things that we have in the houses and the families and the support, you can't expect them to change without us changing to their need, to the way we need to take care of them. And I do have a lot of ideas how to do that better, and I'd be glad to share it with anybody that's willing to learn and try. Another thing I see, a lot of big projects with the county and the city coming together, and I congratulate you for that and your hard work. But during this, everybody else is so stressed out that it's like just a reaction on a month-to-month thing. Nobody's looking 2 months ahead, and everything is a huge reaction, which really takes away from planning anything that would be of value and consistency for treating the people on a daily basis. They're just a new shelter, 40 beds. Do we have them? How are we going to staff it? And everybody is exhausted that I see. And it's just not good for moving forward in any way. I think I'm out of time. Thank you so much for everybody. Love.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Mr. Harris, do we have any additional speakers?
We do. Last, we have Mary Glazier.
There she is. Ms. Glazier, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mary Glazier. I am a resident of Manor Township, but I also have, with my husband since 1977, owned a property on the 600 block of West Chestnut Street where he's had his office and is kind of a second home for us. I'm here to sort of follow up on what Dave said with regard to issues having to do with unsheltered homeless. And first of all, I want to begin by saying I really appreciate everything that the city has done and the interest that it continues to show in what's a terrifically difficult problem and situation. I recognize and want to state that it's not just the city's responsibility, that every municipality and the county should be involved in addressing the issues, some of which I'm going to raise tonight. But I know that Commissioner Yoder's here, and that's wonderful to see, and the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, of course, is continuing to work with you. So those are really good signs, positive signs. So this is not meant to be critical of them. The comments I'm going to make are informed by the experiences of outreach and housing support workers, as well as grassroots volunteers like Dave, who are dealing with unsheltered homeless on a regular basis. I'm involved in a group. We meet together regularly and share insights, problems, brainstorm, and whatnot. And many of those people aren't in a position to come to City Council tonight for a variety of reasons, but I agreed that I would share some of the things that they would like you to know. First of all, the issue of the loss of 40 shelter beds is something that's on everybody's mind who's working in this field. There has been progress made, people connecting with the food hub, and if there isn't a plan to address the possible loss of those beds, a lot of people will be going back to square one. A number of people have asked also, what is the long-term plan? Quote, please remind folks on council that the shelter beds and other similar topics are the very minimum and only the beginning for solutions for folks. We cannot constantly be behind, as we have for years, in decisions and plans. We cannot keep circulating the relativity and importance of this topic and the struggles people are facing by seasons, and only when it is a hot topic. The long-term solutions require expanding housing options, reducing high staff turnover, and supporting frontline workers, and offering the people on the streets solutions that meet them where they're at. This requires collaboration as well as support from state and federal government. Quote, we can't keep offering the bare minimum and barely meeting requests for aids. There are some short-term things that we could be addressing, though, in the meantime. The increase in cost of securing housing, one outreach worker noted that some individuals are being asked to pay $3,700 to $5,100 in advance of getting an apartment.
Mr. Chair, I just want to note that you have exceeded 3 minutes. If you have a final thought briefly.
My final thought is that there is a cost to doing nothing, and that if you look at the 2006 New Yorker article about $1 Million Murray, I'd be glad to share that link with you. That will give you some idea of what it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, do we have any additional pre-registered comments?
We do not.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who did sign up to speak this evening. We'll now move to reports requested by council. This is a progress update on agreement to provide homelessness services. I want to thank, we have Deb Jones and Justin Eby from the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority here this evening. I thank them for providing a written report as requested to council, which all council members have received prior to tonight's meeting, and for their time in being here tonight. We've obviously heard this evening already from members of our community who care deeply about this issue and their work that the office has been entrusted to lead. And the report tonight will hopefully shed some light on the state of homelessness services in Lancaster County, the challenges they have been facing, and opportunities in the future. I will advise everyone that council will have a chance to ask follow-up questions after their report is delivered, but there is no public comment on the matter, as this is not a legislative matter at this time. However, we will be discussing related legislation at an upcoming meeting, so there will be a chance to comment at that time. Justin, Mr. Eby, thank you.
All right. Good evening, councilors, mayor, members of the public. I'm just going to provide just a real brief opening and then turn it over to Deb Jones, our Director of Human Services, and the Director of the Office of for the Homeless Coalition. Again, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you tonight to address any of the issues. Homelessness is a very complex issue, as you've heard tonight from Mary and others. We continue to have the dialogue with members of the public, with elected officials, with other areas of the state, of the country, to find best practices and solutions that would work here in a cost-effective, but also in a way that addresses the ongoing rise of homelessness in our community. You kind of already stated some of the things I wanted to open with. That this is the report in itself provides the variables, the current issues within the city and the county, the challenges, but then also the opportunities. We have a real opportunity with the resources that are available to this community to really address solutions long term. We can put a Band-Aid on things. We can continue to spend a lot of dollars on sheltering and on other practices, but it's really what is going to move the needle forward. How are we going to get the folks into housing, into the supports? Homelessness is a very complex issue. It's not just being evicted. It's not just having generational wealth. It's not necessarily substance abuse, mental health. The list goes on. And so each case is unique. So you might have 4 or 5 different populations or issues you're trying to resolve with 1 or 2 potential projects or ideas. And so that's why it takes some time to build, to educate, to build the understanding, and to provide solutions to our issues. I just wanted to acknowledge that since the last time we've been here, it's been a huge effort to get 80 beds for the winter months. It's a critical need to shelter those who are willing to come in during especially times of bad weather. And I just want to commend Food Hub, their leadership. Paige McFarland's here, the executive director. The collaborative effort between the city staff, a major provider that knows these people, that's willing to step up. It's been, again, you look at every industry, there's burnout, there are staffing issues, and they stepped up and they were able to make sure people were making those connections. So I didn't want to leave tonight without thanking Paige, because again, we can come up with these plans, but we need the boots on the ground and the organizations that are willing to step up and take this on. And you'll see in the report, there's a lot of data information about what we've seen over the last couple of months. There's also the continuing challenges and conversations among collaborative efforts made, providers that we've continued to engage. They have a lot of great knowledge, and together, I think that's unique about Lancaster, the county, the city, all municipalities. You see a lot of efforts of all these individuals wanting to come together and provide a solution. I also just want to thank the city staff as well, the way that we are able to work and bounce off ideas and to work alongside city staff on these issues and these problems is to be commended as well. I'm going to turn the report portion over to Deb to kind of go through and also be willing to answer any questions. But I think, again, this report really shows the current need, but also potential solutions that make economical sense. Deb?
Well, thank you. Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you tonight. Before I dive into the report about the extended emergency shelter, I just want to remind us, as we're thinking about homelessness services here in Lancaster County, known as the Lancaster County Homelessness Coalition or the Continuum of Care. It is an array of services from street outreach to coordinated entry to shelters day and evening, to Refresh Lancaster, our mobile hygiene unit, to the numerous housing programs that we offer here in Lancaster County. And we are really glad to have a vast number of agencies to support the efforts. But as I've said before, there's not enough agencies, nor is there enough funding to provide for and meet the increasing need that we see each and every year around homelessness. So tonight, we are here at your request. There are 5 specific points that were given to us to address about homelessness as it relates to the extended shelter. And each of those points we have addressed in a 5-page report that we submitted to Council on Friday, February 23rd, hoping that the detail in those reports can help understand the current state of the efforts that have been made around the extended shelter of 40 beds, as well as some of the challenges that we have incurred. And so in that report, the specific detail allows for data of usage since December 18th, all the way through February 14th, with details that come straight from our HMIS system, the Homelessness Management Information System, called Empower Lancaster. It also details the responses to our short-term plan and our mid-term plan. It includes a very detailed budget that we anticipated when we met in the beginning of December for the extended shelter. The budget that we proposed, and we are receiving invoices, and we expect it will be pretty close to the reality of what we have seen as expenses for 101 nights. And then the remaining part of the report talks about an interim plan with specific details about what we are intending and suggesting to council as a proposal to renegotiate the terms of the agreement. So in summary, as we look forward, we have learned in looking at it almost like a rear view mirror, if you will. We are able to now see some lessons learned since December, some realities that we did not experience at the time of planning. And as you can see from the budget that we have shown on page 3, that the anticipated shelter expenses for 12 months will be $1.2 million. This expenditure is not fiscally prudent, nor is it sustainable. And as we look at the obstacles explained in the report about needing a provider starting April 1st of 2024 to carry the mission of the extended shelter beds, the 40 beds, the challenges that we've had, and to date, we do not have a provider secured for those services. Further, another obstacle that's explained in the report is that the facility that we currently are at temporarily has been secured through May 31st, 2024, and has not been committed thereafter. So with those barriers addressed in the report before you with detail, we are respectfully requesting to change or to pivot the plan to be able to have the extended shelter close on March 31st, 2024, and reopen for the winter of 2024, beginning in December, when we have a permanent facility available and an occupancy permit provided for a December opening, where we will be able to host the 40 beds for the extended shelter and the additional beds for the emergency shelter. That is our recommendation. You might ask, well, what are we, the Homelessness Coalition, going to be doing in the interim when there are no longer 40 additional beds? We've been through this before. We did not have 80 emergency beds as of December 1st of last year. But yet we know that there's a need. And as you can see from the data we provided, there is usage of the beds. So the interim report found on pages 4 and 5 spell out 3 best practices that we are proposing to focus on to be able to meet the need from April 1st until December of 2024. These 3 practices, best practices, 2 of which come with a funding need. And so we laid forth what the system needs. The system for homelessness needs. Our first intended approach during this interim period is targeted street outreach, increasing our street outreach that is occurring by additional staffing to be able to work directly with individuals experiencing homelessness. We have an existing system in place. It's not enough people and it's not enough funds. So we are able to raise additional money, as spelled out in the report, total of $100,000. We will be able to add on additional staff who will be able to be focusing on that engagement and helping to move people into the next step. For brevity's sake, I'm going to go on to number 2. The second best practice approach, and we've seen some of these approaches happen throughout the nation, but this one in particular we have piloted since the spring of 2023. The second approach is extended supportive services. What we have seen is if we can get people into apartments, it does not mean that they will not recidivate back into the community and homelessness. But if we can have case managers walking alongside that household and working with that household for a period of time. We piloted a model last year for a period of 3 to 6 months, and we have seen success with that. We've seen 20 households be housed and remain housed. Because of the clientele that we're talking about here, our intervention number 2 is for case management for a period of 6 to 12 months, because we know an elongated dedicated time is important. And we are recommending for staffing for a 12-month period of additional costs of $100,000 to $140,000. And the third intervention that's based on best practices is to continue to do what we're doing, and that is building housing stock. This year, as I mentioned in the report, we have increased funding for 14 new permanent supportive housing units that are happening in the city as soon as Prince Street Hub opens up. We've never seen 14 additional permanent supportive housing units enter into the system before. And these are for individuals who have chronic disabilities. So we are moving the needle forward as the entire homelessness response system. But what we are suggesting in this particular intervention is an interdisciplinary team that can come together between city, county, housing authorities, also with homelessness services, to be able to work specifically for supportive housing, to gain more supportive housing for our community. There's no price tag to that. So it's with our humble request that we are asking that the City Council be able to renegotiate the terms of the agreement based on the information that we have seen, with the cost to be good stewards of the funding to make a lasting impact in our community. To be able to find support for these interim measures, to be able to meet the needs. We need more housing. We certainly need the 80 beds. But just like you cannot make someone go to an emergency shelter to sleep, we cannot make an agency take on the responsibilities of a program. And so we have worked diligently, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have for us tonight.
Deb, thank you so much for your report. I'd like to just start off, I have 2 questions this time, and then I'll open it up to other members of council. Just some specifics. Besides the $1 million for the Prince Street Hub that you have received, has the Housing and Redevelopment Authority received any ARPA funding from the county government? And if so, how is it allocated? It's going to be a couple-part question. And if not, could the Housing and Development Authority apply for any funding, or could they have applied for funding from the RFPs that were put out?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. we're going to tag team answers based on our focus areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so to date for projects within the city, we have utilized $1.3 million of county CDBG CV funding, which is the second round. You wouldn't call it necessarily ARPA, but it was the Consolidated Plan Act of December of 2022, I believe. That was for acquisition and soft costs. We also have CDBG set aside for Otterbein in the amount of $200,000 at this point. We have, it's called Home ARPA funding. That amount is flexible as far as it can be used for non-congregate shelter, so that can go towards Prince Street, as well as for the permanent supportive units on the second floor. So that's also county ARPA funding. And then, trying to think, additionally, when we submitted for the county ARPA funding, that was for Prince Street. That was before some of the realized costs, and that was back in August, prior to working with you guys, even moving farther back as far as the bigger ARPA picture. The 1600 was developed on what we knew at that time. Obviously, to have a permanent low barrier shelter at Otterbein is a significant increased cost that if we had known in the past, we might have looked at other additional sources as well. So some of it is still identifying sources. We will be hiring a fundraising consultant to also maximize other foundation and business interest in. We know there's a business interest in solutions, and so we also need the assistance and staff capacity to bring in the public-private partnership. So in general, we've utilized a lot of federal HUD county funding. We have the $1 million request that was awarded for county ARPA funding for homelessness. And we additionally look to potential other sources to bring in for these projects.
Thank you very much. And my second question is not directly related to that, but while the report didn't specifically mention a housing first model, it does mention some really key components of such a model, like expanding the permanent supportive housing. And I mean, you know, the studies show that often the benefits outweigh the cost of such a model. And obviously housing availability is a huge barrier to that model. But to your knowledge, has this model been discussed within the continuum of care? And what has that conversation sounded like up until this point? And where are the needs if that were to be what we would move to do?
Just for clarity's sake, the question has to do is, does the continuum of care affirm the housing first model? And how is that manifesting itself in some of the programs? Am I following?
It sounds like some of the things in your next steps, in the next steps you mentioned, were very similar to some things in the housing first model. I'm just curious if the continuum of care, if that's been a discussion, and what in your view would that take for this to happen in our community?
Yes. So the Housing First framework is incredibly important as it relates to homelessness, and it is required by the federal government. It is required by the Housing and Urban Development for communities at the COC that receive federal funds. The framework is that individuals should access housing regardless of barriers. There should not be any barriers in place. You should meet the needs. If you think about Maslow's triangle, right? Meet basic needs, and housing is one of those basic needs. So once when you have individuals who are safe and secure in housing, then you can have wraparound staff to be able to work with them on the multitude of of areas that need attention, whether that be anger management, whether that be budgeting, whether that be substance abuse disorder or mental health. And the goal is that you will be able, as a system, to meet the needs better and more effectively using this framework. Now, in 2017, we saw that framework to be extremely beneficial here in Lancaster County. It was a very different housing market at the time. We had availability in our permanent supportive housing programs, in our Pathways Rapid Rehousing programs, in our we just started the crisis housing at that time. But it's very different now. We can still have the Housing First framework, and we believe in that, but because the outflow is restricted by the affordable housing crisis, it is making it very challenging. The goal remains the same, through a social work lens, being able to meet people where they're at, and we heard that tonight by Mr. Castorello, be able to meet them at where they're at, engage in and helping them into the next step that's best suited for them. And so I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I'll open it up to questions from other members of council this time.
If I may come,
Councilor Diaz.
in regards to housing, you're lacking the housing, you're lacking the support. I was confronted with someone that has a church, and they mentioned that they would have like space for 40 beds. So the question is, what is the process that they would have to go through in regards to making it available to the public for the homeless? And where would I find that information? I can't recall the church's name at this point. I know that it's in Lancaster City. And I think, they have the restroom and they have some certain areas where beds can be placed. So give me the information to what would be the steps that they would have to take. That basically is my question.
One email address, mine, okay? djones@lchra.com. The community has to be part of the solutions. That's fantastic news.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz.
Council President, if I may. When reviewing the budget that was presented to us for extended shelter bed situation, we've determined that cost is, or you determined that this cost is going to be $1.2 million in operations costs. So that's finding, a provider that's going to run the shelter and then operate at $1.2 million a year. So would you say this budget that's been presented in the report is reflective of what the cost would be to operate such a shelter at Otterbein? How would the budget compare? Because my understanding is Otterbein is like a permanent shelter space as opposed to moving throughout the city. So how would the budget compare?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Hirsch. So just to level set for 1 minute, on page 3, you see a budget. The top part of the budget is for the extended shelter. And then at the bottom part, the last 4 rows is for the pre-existing emergency shelter. So that budget's based on 101 nights, right? So for the extended shelter, 101 nights is $252,000. For the pre-existing emergency shelter, right, because these terms can get interchanged, so the ones that have been around since the beginning of COVID that our system did not have before COVID, right, it's been around since 2020, those 40 beds, you will see for 101 nights, $83,000 and change. Okay. Our system, the Homelessness Response System, the Homelessness Coalition, has been able to invest in our low barrier pre-existing shelter about $306,000 a year. And that's not enough to run it, right? Yep. So, but the system itself, because the funding is all we can invest in it, okay? So up until this opportunity to collaborate for an additional extended shelter, we have been able to make that small of an investment compared to what we're looking at for extended shelter. We would find Otterbein, and certainly would hope to see Otterbein more in line with what the existing system is able to pay as opposed to the 1.2 million. So for instance, looking at that extended shelter, we will not see at Otterbein paying for portable toilets, right? For 9 porta potties and hand washing sinks that are being serviced twice a week, because we will have showers and restrooms at Otterbein. And we certainly do not expect to be paying the facilities and utilities at the cost that we're paying here for the extended shelter. That makes Otterbein a permanent location much more feasible, and the ability to house both the shelters. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Additional questions from council? Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the presentation. I just had 2 quick questions. First, with those who are currently utilizing the beds that in the interim plan would go away at the end of March, what work are we doing with those individuals to help them get services or have some type of aftercare program for them?
Mr. Ahmed, that is a very good question. Now, we have to remember that on December 17th, we did not have 80 beds in our system, right? Because of the Lancaster County Food Hub, we were able to have these 80 beds through this winter month. So we would need to resort back to our existing system and the services that are available. And so the beds would not be available, these 40 beds. We will be seeing, as I said in the report, more individuals sleeping rough outside, just like we did before the extended shelter would open. The interim plan is a good plan, the 3 best practices, but it comes with the ability or the challenge of raising the money to make that happen. Without that plan, we will continue to utilize the best services that we can with the system that we already have.
Thank you. My second question is, what is the status on Ebenezer Baptist Church with the night shelter that they had? I know that they had some boiler issues. Have we seen any updates on that situation? I do live right around that area, and I saw people, utilizing it quite frequently. So I was just seeing if you guys had any update on that. And would that be a more feasible plan to help them with the boiler, rather than, having to do some of these other things?
I'm going to let Justin speak to that, but I will say that our team presented there at Ebenezer, and there was heat. So that was a good thing. That was just last Wednesday.
Yeah. To address your question, I have gotten a report as of Friday from our architects. We spent some time and effort to understand what it would take to reopen Ebenezer. There's significant information that we need to share. I'd actually have a meeting this week to share that with them. So I don't want to get too far into that report. I'm happy to share that report after. But there is a significant investment needed to reopen that shelter as well. And so when looking at Otterbein compared to Ebenezer, we have to outweigh what is the investment, what is the total number of shelter beds, and how can we help Ebenezer moving forward as well with their endeavors to continue to serve that population.
So if we were able to get Ebenezer reopened, I know that you guys are working with them. How would that work into the interim plan?
Given the report that I've seen, it would not be able to reopen in time to really have an interim impact.
Thank you. And I would look forward to seeing some updates on it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Additional questions from council? Mayor Sarachi.
Thank you. I will just follow up on that point and just speaking very generally. It is really important for congregate housing to meet safety standards related to building code. And so some of the properties, the extensive look of properties that the Redevelopment Authority and the Homeless Coalition have reviewed would not meet those basic safety standards related to egress, sprinkler systems, handicap accessible, et cetera, for the diversity of population that's being served. And so there are challenges to that, and I appreciate that the Redevelopment Authority is working closely with our codes officials to make sure that as we are advancing for the first time in 15 years at least, the first permanent shelter in the city of Lancaster since the closure of Christus Attucks many years ago. And so the fact that we have been functioning so long without a permanent shelter has been because of the generosity of Ebenezer and other churches like St. Mary's and others who have filled that gap for this number of years. But the needs are so different today than they were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And so I just say that to provide a little bit more perspective about the challenges of finding a space that is going to meet the minimum safety standards for congregate care. I also read with interest the report, and Deb, I want to thank you for that, and Justin and Paige and everyone else that's here, Amos, Mary, Dave, and Carol, who have spent time talking with me and working on this issue. I really, really appreciate it. And I have to tell you, I'm a little heart sick. I'm sorry. About the state that we are in at this moment. I also just want to call attention to the fact that of the 165 unduplicated individuals, this is the top of page 2, accessing services at the low barrier emergency shelter and extended shelter between December 1st and February 14th, 88% of them are from Lancaster County. These are not strangers to us. And I think that is so important because people find themselves in the city for a lot of different reasons. The access to medical care, the access to shelter beds, the access to bus services, you name it. There is a lot more access that's here. Food, there are meals that are provided every day. But it is very untenable at this moment, given just, and the work has been there, you guys. I see it, and I know how hard our team has been working on this. Rebecca, I'm going to give you a shout out as well. But we are now moving into a time, a season, in which there is the potential of not having any shelter beds for a period of time, this interim time, which is going to be very critical. And while I would say that there is no limit to the compassion that we have as a community, there are limits to the patience of having people who are living on our streets and who, because of a variety of reasons, are not able to make it to the bathroom, that are engaging in very unproductive behavior that is putting other people at risk. And that is not to say that is everyone. Please understand what I'm saying. But please also know that there are about to be dozens upon dozens more individuals that are going to be on the streets this summer and fall until we get Otterbein, the minimum of Otterbein, up and running. So I just call that out because we are in a crisis situation. I am talking to as many people as I can. I want to hold up the partnership between the city and the county, and I am very concerned that at the end of this, when the ARPA money is spent, the city of Lancaster has $0 to commit to housing beyond ARPA. There is no other money that is coming to the city. That money has been taken back from the federal government and it is now in a block grant to the state to which we have to apply. The state had literally $500,000 available for funding for homelessness services. We applied for over that just for the city of Lancaster. We got 20% of our grant application. We received $118,000 or something dollars. It is wholly insufficient. I also appreciate that the county has been committed to funding and supporting through their CDBG dollars these services year after year after year, have put millions of dollars into this, and that funding has not increased to meet the increased need, not just here in the city, but across the county. In Ephrata, in Columbia, in Denver, every community is seeing more and more people sleeping in their cars, on couches, on the streets, camping, wherever they can find a place to throw up a tent. And so we live in a city where there's a lot of people that are a lot around each other, and we have to figure this out, because I can't continue to feel the complaints that are coming about the defecating, the urinating, the drug use, the et cetera, and continue to meet all of those folks with compassion that they deserve without the resources that are necessary for the task. And so I'm just expressing my frustration and, as I said, heartsickness about the situation that we're in. And I don't believe it is because we're not working at it. I believe that this is requiring a level of engagement and investment that we have not had before. And I look forward to continuing the work with you, Justin, with you, Deb, and Paige, and Commissioner Yoder. I just really appreciate that you're here tonight. Thank you very, very much. And we will keep going, but I just need you to know I'm very concerned about what is to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sarachi. I want to thank Mr. Eby, Ms. Jones, Ms. McFarland, Commissioner Yoder, for all being here tonight and for your work, and I echo Mayor Sarachi's sentiments. I would also mention that I don't know of another forum where we've been able to speak as openly and honestly and completely about this issue, so I appreciate the ability to do that. Next steps for council will include possible revisions to our original agreement, and we'll work with city staff to bring that forward as soon as possible. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you for your time. Yep.
The next item on our agenda is interim reports of committees of council, of which I don't believe we have any. Is that the case, Mr. Harris? All right.
Sorry, we do not, Madam President.
Thank you, just want to be sure. We will now move into our legislative agenda, and I will just make one more mention. I mentioned at the top of the meeting that Resolution 11 won't be taken up at this meeting. And yes, I know if anyone was here for those items or wishes to step out, you won't hurt our feelings, you can do so this time. The next item then would be our ordinances for final passage. We have Bill number 1, 2024. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam President. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, requiring the city to obtain and maintain a welcoming city rating of no less than 3 stars from Welcoming America, codifying the city's practices related to the provision of city services without regard to refuge or immigration status, and requiring the City Council to advocate for the adoption of similar practices and policies by other municipalities, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance will take effect in accordance with Pennsylvania law.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Roy.
Thank you, Council President. I'll speak briefly on this ordinance, but we had the opportunity to introduce this during committee and have a first reading on it. First, I'd just like to thank the members of GASA for your advocacy efforts and collaboration with the city in making this ordinance happen. This ordinance really gives us the opportunity to codify existing practices that the city is operating in, but to ensure that every resident here feels welcomed and safe in receiving city services regardless of their immigration status. And this also allows us to do something very unique in codifying the pursuit of our welcoming city certification status in a minimum of a 3-star rating, which a lot of the policies that we were advocating for towards the city is very much in line with our pursuit of becoming a welcoming city. So this is very exciting. Just want to thank the city administration, Mayor Sirachi, as well as CASA members and the rest of the city council for the opportunity to bring this up for a vote. This is allows us to set the example and really set the tone for the rest of Lancaster County, and hopefully the state and what cities can do to codify and lead by example in creating a safe and welcoming community.
Thank you very much, Councilor Rowe. I'll take any council comments on the bill.
I do have,
Councilor Diaz.
I have a question regarding the policy HB 1840, which was brought forward by the Legislative's office regarding the immigration status. And I'm wondering if you did receive any answers, because I was brought in on January 17. And basically, it would block the municipality and counties from taking action and enforcing law in the Commonwealth or the federal law pertaining to immigration. It also required law enforcement to immediately report to the United States Immigration and Custom Enforcement Office within the Department of Homeland Security and arrest individuals that have reasonably caused any belief not whether they're legal in the United States or not. Is there any comments again regarding that? Because I don't think you ever got back to me.
Mr. Belli, thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for that question, Councilmember Diaz. I did not get any answers back regarding that particular bill. I do want to raise that one of the CASA is working with Representative Danilo Burgos in regards to some immigration. Just being aware of immigration policies such as this one to see what we can do about it. I did receive just a brief answer that from Danilo Burgos that he didn't think that it would make it on the floor or that it would pass. So that he's saying for now there's no need to be alarmed about this bill, and that it hasn't even been presented or taken out of committee at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do, just to note, it looks like the last action was in November of 2023. It was referred to the Judiciary Committee of the State Level, and it has not moved since.
Right.
It was actually January 17, 2024. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Additional council comments on the bill? And we'll take comments from the public. Sorry, I should have said it before I sat down.
Awesome.
And just please, for the meeting record, begin with your name and block of residence.
Yes, my name is Daniel Alvalle, State Director for CASA in Pennsylvania. Wanted to thank Lancaster City Council members, Mayor Sirachi, for this opportunity to be here tonight to speak and to represent CASA. Around this time in 2017, times were scary and uncertain for the immigrant community. There were many attempts at that point to destroy any hope for the immigrant communities. One of the many executive orders enacted by then President Trump barred entry to all refugees from anywhere in the world for 120 days and placed an indefinite ban on refugees from war-torn Syria. While this was short-lived, it is a reality that echoes for many still, as racist and hateful unconstitutional bills are created every day. But Lancaster City and CASA members have done something different, have done something to be proud of. This day will be a day to be remembered, a day that seeks to overshadow and silence the ignorance and hate that exist. Today marks a special day for CASA members and the city of Lancaster. CASA members are the heroes in this battle for immigrant rights. The community's heroes are present today in this room. They fight tirelessly and proudly for dignity, equity, and respect for their communities. Today shows that we all win when we unite for a common cause. Today's victory will come in the form of the Lancaster Trust Act. This bill sends a message loud and clear to others that Lancaster City is truly a welcoming city for all, and that they should also follow in Lancaster City's example. I want to end with a quote from our writer and editor, Michelle Herrera Mulligan, and she says, as people of color, we have a potent power and a responsibility to change events around us, not just professionally, but spiritually and politically as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional comments from the public on the bill? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Lourdes Garcia. I'm a community organizer for CASA in Lancaster. I have two stories for my members of Lancaster. Okay, the first one. My name is Germán Paredes. I am from Dominican Republic, a member of CASA. I am live in the city of Lancaster. My family and I are very happy to have found a place to live in Lancaster. And since our arrival, we have called it home. As an immigrant who can come to this country with the hope that my family will have a better quality of life when I learn about CASA and a new Data Trust Act proposed by my community is being supported by the mayor and the city council. I hasted to add my voice to thank you for the support, and that a great gesture of making all of us as immigrants and Latins feel more than welcome in this city. With the implementation of the Trust Act, we can be an active part of anywhere. We'll no longer have any fear contacting the authority when it is necessary in case of emergency. And I can reaffirm that is the act which changed our life completely. Today, I want to thank you for the work and support that has been given to the approval of this petition, and also say strongly that we look forward to its implementation with a great joy. Unit, city, town, and CASA, we can make a difference. And I have the second. Okay, my name is Fidel Gil Cedeño, and I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I have been a CASA member for 6 years, and I'm an active leadership council member on the CASA in Lancaster community commitment. I'm an original from Dominican Republic. We are live until due to economic and work difficulties. I have decided to go out to look for a better future, and that is how I arrived in this country in 1983. Since that, I have a resident in the city of Lancaster. Here I found a new job opportunities and a different life with a quality for me and my family. My arrival in this country opened many doors, just as CASA opened doors for all us immigrants, working class and Latin. When I learned about the Trust Act, I realized that gives us back the hope and the finding the treatment and peace of men that we all deserve. I have heard so many testimonies from members of the CASA community, and that we are worried and very sad because it affects the entire family, especially the children. That is why it is necessary that we support this initiative, such as the Act of Trust Act. Seeing is our culture, being afraid of the authority and associating immigration status connect us, and they thought of being separate from families scare us. The city of Lancaster welcomes us, but it's even so fair and it is really about having more supporters, and the certainly that we are taking into account makes us feel free to trust the authority and feel protected. That is why I know I want to publicly acknowledge and express my satisfaction to the mayor and the city and the Lancaster City Council for showing the support to our immigrant and Latin community in the process and acceptances, that even more so in the implementation process. I am very happy from the collaborative working that the city has done with CASA to make Lancaster a magnificent city, to continue being a happy citizen and proud of their representative. Once again, can say until it's strange. Thank you very much.
Ms. Garcia, thank you very much. I know that those two individuals weren't able to come before us, so I appreciate your willingness to read their comments, and I did allow for additional time for that this evening. Are there any additional comments on the bill before us? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Madden. Aye. Mr. Royal.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Gregg.
Aye.
Ms. Stevens.
Aye.
Mr. Hirsch.
Aye.
And President Bacon.
Aye. Thank you. Congratulations. Our next item before us this evening is Bill number 2, 2024. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the Lancaster City Council amending Chapter 273 of the Code of the City of Lancaster, trees, to provide a definition for encroaching tree and to provide for permits under Chapter 273 to be issued by the Department of Public Works, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with Pennsylvania law.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's see. This was through Public Works Department. Councilor Hirsch.
Thank you, Council President. So this bill is being read, final reading. Here, the ordinance essentially has a few main goals. First, defining an encroaching, let me back up. Background being that our current tree ordinance is not consistent with court rulings and Pennsylvania law and principles of common law and property ownership. So we are adding a definition to define an encroaching tree being a tree that is on one person's property and then branches out over into a neighboring property. It clarifies who can issue a permit in the event that providing for such private property rights and allowing a property owner to trim an encroaching tree that is on their property to their own property line essentially allows for the Department of Public Works to issue such a permit in instances where it may be detrimental to the life of the tree and would not allow a licensed arborist to issue such a permit. And then finally, the ordinance does clarify that such trimming can only occur within the bounds of one's private property, so you can't trim beyond your property line. You can only trim an encroaching tree up to your own property line. There's a few other details, but Director Campbell, did I get everything? Okay.
Thank you very much, Councilor Hirsch. Director Campbell, if you'd like to come for council. Good evening.
Hello, thank you very, very much. I'd like to just clarify and emphasize a couple of the points that Commissioner Hirsch had indicated. We're primarily trying to address two key concerns of the existing ordinance. One, that it does not recognize the reality of trespass. Under common law, the encroachment of a tree over a common boundary onto an adjacent property is deemed a trespass. And in that case, under common law, people are allowed to be able to address that with their own self-help and be able to just cut the tree even without permission. The city of Lancaster wants to ensure that we are engaged in very particular procedures, and we can actually require a permit for any of the trimming of a permanent tree and or a shade tree. I do want to emphasize that some of the arguments that many people have made go to the effect of whether the root system or the trees overhanging can be conceived of as a prescriptive easement or adverse possession. The courts have not held in those regards. They have overturned every attempt to grandfather in the growth of root systems or of trees. The city ordinance cannot take away common law rights. Only state legislation can do that. And I do want to say that I'm very, very heartened by the fact that we have so many people who are Loraxes, if you will, fighting for the trees in every conceivable way possible. However, we want to make sure that we are not abridging the common law and the state law. The other aspect that our current ordinance abridges is the permitting. We currently require a permit for mature trees to be pruned, as well as for shade trees to be pruned. And we, in essence, are putting the applicant in a catch-22 because our ordinance requires that the arborist sign off on that approval. If we prohibit a person who applies from being able to address the trespass, the city is in violation of common law and of state law. And as such, we have a lot of things that are potentially at risk. One of those things is the potential of our tree ordinance being overturned in its entirety. At best, we might hope that the things that we are asking for, such as clarification on private property to private property of the ability to prune the tree, even if it is a trespass tree, be maintained, that would be the minimum that would be held. The second might be a modification above and beyond what is being proposed, which may actually remove the safeguard, which is that we require a permit, because it would be seen that the offending clause is the one that requires the permit to be issued. And the third, a judge could find that the entire tree ordinance would be unlawful, in which case the city would suddenly be without a tree ordinance. Our tree ordinance is one of the strongest tree ordinances in the state of Pennsylvania as it currently stands. And some of the provisions that we've put into this ordinance revision strengthen that ordinance even further by requiring that there be documentation, that there be sketch plans, et cetera, and that we require that there be permitting for these kinds of trespass trimmings that may be required. I also want to make it very, very clear that what we do not alter any provision of the existing Shade Tree Commission or as it pertains to the existing ordinance. We do not alter the rights, responsibilities, or authority of the Shade Tree Commission. We do not change the fact that a permit is required to prune any shade or protected tree, and we do not alter Section 273 to protect trees during construction. So in many ways, we are saving the best parts of the ordinance. We are strengthening the ones that we felt are a bit weaker, and we are addressing head-on the conflict, which is common law, state law versus our ordinance. And a city, as I had said before, a city ordinance cannot take away common law rights. Only state legislation can do that.
Director Campbell, thank you very much for your clarification. I will take comments from council at this time.
If I may,
Councilor Diaz.
So what you're saying is that the amendment is solely applies to the state law. Is that what you're saying?
It applies to how we execute, what our ordinance does and says and what it allows, which at present, it allows breaking common law, which is not defensible.
Okay, just to make myself clear here, you're stating that the city ordinance does not need to align with the state law to be valid for enforcement. Is that correct? Is that what we're trying to do?
Does not need to, we want to align the ordinance, the tree ordinance, with common law and state law. And that means that if a tree is trespassing over someone's property, the entity whose tree is trespassing has the right to remedy that trespass.
So, in the instance, which is the College Avenue issue where a man lost his job because he was protecting the tree ordinance, is that correct?
I will say this.
The specific building that's being built and the property owner that does not want to hurt her tree or basically protect the tree that's supposed to be protected over the tree ordinance, right? So my question is, again, being that this person was protecting his job, protecting the law, he loses his job because of this, now you want to change the law. Is that correct?
I cannot speak to the circumstances around any HR action. I do know that this situation that we're talking about is not an uncommon one, and it is something that was unclear and was contradictory to state law and to common law.
But it's only one project. So if it wouldn't have been for this project, this would never happen. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Additional council comments on the bill? I do have just a clarifying question to kind of get to the heart of it here. So, two things. This bill does not change anything about our current tree, or allows us to continue to enforce our current tree manual. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, it reinforces the fact that the ordinance currently is mute on requiring compliance with the tree manual. This ordinance says that you must comply with the tree manual.
Thank you very much.
If I may, Council President.
Councilor Royo.
Just a comment. I know these ordinances can get a little tricky with the language, so I just appreciate you and your team's dedication to making sure that you're meticulous about these ordinances. I think I understand there's a lot of residents that are frustrated around maybe the tension between the common law or the state law and our city ordinance, but do appreciate your efforts to actually strengthen it in the process. So just want to thank you for your team, because these decisions are always easy to come by. So.
Thank you. And I will say that part of our challenge had been that most of the staff are very much Loraxes as well, and wanted to make sure that we were protecting the rights of both sets of parties in any such private property to private property transaction. The Shade Tree Commission requirements and the Shade Tree laws already protect the trees that are near property lines but are also near the public right-of-way. And those things are under the authority of the Shade Tree Commission, and many instances have come before Shade Tree Commission as well in the past.
Thank you, Director Campbell. At this time, I'll open up to comments from the public. Please make sure that you're speaking at the microphone. Begin your comments with your name and block of residence for the record.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, please proceed.
Hi, yes, Robert LaGrassa, 600 block of West Chestnut Street, and you were just distributed a copy of a letter from our real estate attorney who actually reviews the proposed amendments, along with Mr. Campbell's memo on February 22nd. This comes from Eric Winkle. Thank you for sending me the amendments the city is proposing for its protected tree ordinance. I have read the proposed amendments in Stephen Campbell's memo of February 22nd, trying to justify the amendments. Obviously, the city has decided to eliminate all protections for Lancaster's irreplaceable shade trees. I'm afraid that if the ordinance is passed, the city will look much more like Philadelphia or Harrisburg in a few years, when all of the large old shade trees have been removed to make way for more buildings. The proposed amendments to the current tree ordinance in Lancaster are very troubling. The purported need for the amendments is simply not true. The claim that a local ordinance cannot limit a recognized common law right is ridiculous. Mr. Campbell's memo of February 22nd, 2024 is based on his completely false statement that the city ordinance cannot take away common law rights. Most city ordinances limit or take away common law rights that would otherwise exist. For example, every single zoning ordinance and regulation in Pennsylvania limits, restricts, or eliminates rights that would otherwise exist. Case law supports that. His memo was clearly written for one reason: to eliminate any protection ancient shade trees have in the city of Lancaster. His proposed amendments to the tree ordinance would leave the Shade Tree Commission powerless to stop rampant development. Those amendments will also enable the destruction of Lancaster's shade tree canopy over large parts of the city. Local governments, such as the city, have broad police powers to protect and enhance their citizens' lives and communities, more case law. This police power goes far beyond writing laws to be enforced by police officers. The power extends to ensuring the quality of life of city residents and preservation of neighborhoods, more case law supports that. This broad power allows the city to do many things, such as impose virtually every imaginable zoning restriction, requires fire escape on properties, prevent parking on streets by non-residents, prohibit parking all along some streets, restricting renting of properties, prohibiting building on parts of every parcel of land, and requiring a certain amount of property to remain green space. These are just a few examples of the legitimate exercise of this power by the city. Mr. Campbell misleads any reader of his memo. He does not inform anyone that the current tree ordinance is legally presumed to be both constitutional and valid. Case law to support that. Also, because it was enacted more than 2 years ago, the city, residents of the city, and other landowners of property are presumed to have relied upon the validity and effectiveness of the current tree ordinance. More case law. The power of the courts is very limited when deciding the validity of such ordinance. A court could only declare the current tree ordinance invalid if it violates a fundamental law clearly, palpably, and plainly. Where the validity of an ordinance is debatable, it must be upheld as valid. It is a heavy burden to challenge and defeat a local ordinance. Simply claiming the ordinance limits a common law right that would otherwise exist does not come close to satisfying that burden. Virtually every local ordinance in Pennsylvania limits a right that would otherwise exist. That is why ordinances are enacted in the first place. The immediate effect of the proposed tree ordinance revision is certain. They will eliminate all protections that large shade trees in the city of Lancaster now have. Most, if not all, of the large shade trees grow over property boundary lines. That is why the current ordinance was needed in the first place. The city administration is simply surrendering to the demands of a single project developer and is throwing out all protections for historic trees to make that development more profitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaGrasse. Additional comment from the public on the bill?
Yes.
Michelle LaGrassa, 600 block of West Chestnut Street. Good evening, council members, neighbors, and Mayor Sirachi. I would like to take this opportunity to address the proposed amendments to our existing tree ordinance as currently presented to you for approval. The letter from our attorney is quite clear. The statements being made by the mayor's office as well as Mr. Campbell are completely false. They are false to such an extent that Mr. Campbell makes assumptions and attempts to interpret the law for which he is not qualified. The case law Mr. Campbell is quoting is misleading. In fact, it is so misleading and false that by making such incorrect statements, I believe Mr. Campbell himself is committing fraud. Mr. Campbell has not presented any statements or documentations that either read on the advice of legal counsel, nor have I seen a letter or statement directly from the city solicitor. I would like you to take a moment and ask yourself this very important question: why? The reasoning behind this requested amendment was, and I quote, "The current amendment is being requested to comply with state law." This statement, again, is incorrect, and what Mr. Campbell is not telling you, nor do I believe he has even researched or fully understands, is the case law for which he is citing. The cited case law is for court cases in jurisdictions where no current ordinances exist. In that case, and that case alone, would the law revert back to state law. I highly advise you to read and understand the letter from Attorney Winkle. The vote on this amendment is no, and I, along with an experienced real estate attorney, just outlined this claim as being false and ridiculous. I have sadly watched for the past 3 years as this administration has lied, manipulated, and threatened council members, planning commission members, and zoning officials into believing their own version of law and policy as they see fit, regardless of legality or consequence. It is for this reason that I have chosen to file ethics complaints against each and every council member with the Attorney General's office. I believe you have lost sight of who you represent. You represent me, my neighbors, and the residents of Lancaster City. You do not work for Mayor Sirachi, her political agenda, or assisting her with making good on her tens of thousands of dollars in campaign contribution promises. These same contributions were made directly and indirectly by developers. Mayor Sirachi, after months of interviews and investigation, I have filed a corruption complaint against you with the Attorney General's office and the FBI for what I believe to be excessive conflicts of interest, unethical practice, and financial mismanagement. In Pennsylvania, corrupt conduct is defined as any conduct of any person, whether or not a public official, that adversely affects or that could adversely affect, either directly or indirectly, the honest or impartial exercise of official functions by any public official, any group or body of public officials, or any public authority. Public corruption is a breach of trust by federal, state, or local officials, often with the help of private sector accomplices. Public corruption misdirects public monies, distorts governmental decision-making, and threatens our democratic processes. I repeat that again. We'll repeat that again. Distorts governmental decision-making. I no longer believe, as do my neighbors, that you are looking out for the best interests of our community. I can only hope that a state or federal agency believes as I do, that an ethical line has been crossed and holds you accountable for your conduct. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. LaGrassa. Are there additional public comments on the bill? You got right ahead. Mr. Dasher.
Tony Dasher, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. Yeah, I don't even really know what to say. I think the frustration exemplifies, like, all right, I'm going to back up. Like, we know that there's a lot of contention around a specific project. We know that I have been in the room where this project's been put forward for approval in certain instances, and I've told these residents to their face at times I disagree with their opinions regarding parking and height, but they got a point about the trees, man. They really do. I'm really disappointed that this couldn't go to some level of having community meetings and talking about potential changes. And I think this is one of my concerns with quote unquote the efficiency of government. When we worked through the Airbnb ordinance on Planning Commission, we had listening sessions. In fact, I think some people back there might have been there even. I feel like I'm in a really weird place right now. Like, I really do. And I don't know that I'd go that far, but I definitely feel that there's, like, for example, our current ordinance already requires a permit. The language of the ordinance already requires a permit. I feel like we keep hearing about permits and that this is now requiring a permit. Like, no, permits were always required. In fact, the ordinance is working because a permit hasn't been issued for the trees removal. This is the part of politics that frustrates me the most, and I'm trying my best to be polite, because at my core, I'm really frustrated that, frankly, I'm here tonight just making a frustrated comment when I want to get back home so I can finish my final project for my school course. Like, to do at 2 a.m. and I procrastinate because I do stuff like this. So, yeah, I do encourage you to vote no and potentially have some sort of session so that we can work through some modifications that may be more appealing to the public. I know it would at least be a session that I would try to attend. Because you can vote no and still propose the same thing at a later date. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go finish my project.
Thank you, Mr. Jasper. Are there additional comments from the public?
I apologize now if I start coughing. My name is Laurie Ulrich, and I live on the first 100 block of North Shippen. Trees grow, their roots spread, as do their branches. We live on top of each other in the city, and trees will grow and trespass adjacent properties, and that cannot be a reason to prune or remove a tree. Unless it's about to damage a house, a branch is slapping against a house whenever there's a storm, or it's dangerously close to the literal home. I had a tree I had to remove because the roots were about to punch through the walls of my cellar. Okay, I felt bad about it, but it was a legitimate thing. Had it been my neighbor's cellar, I would have understood the request. But simply shading someone's patio inconveniently is not a reason to make someone cut down their tree or butcher it, which is what you would end up doing. Trees are necessary. The word health does not appear in the ordinance, not that I could find. So I'm concerned about that being part of the permit approval process and being a significant motivation in approving the permits or not approving them. Trees are necessary, from new trees to very old trees. Big root systems absorb stormwater. Large canopies clean the air and provide homes to birds, which we've heard about the concern for tonight. They make our city beautiful. I have no faith that permit requests will be denied, and businesses and residents with selfish motives will win out, and trees will be butchered and removed on whims driven by commercial goals and people who don't understand what living in a city means.
Thank you very much. Are there additional comments from the public on the bill? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Bill Hannigan, 300 block of College Avenue. I speak in support of others tonight in calling for a pause in action to advance Amendment 02-2024. I ask the City Department of Public Works to identify a single other project other than 213 College Avenue addressed by 02-2024. Amendment 02-2024 undercuts tree protection, Chapter 273 of SALDO, and the city's tree manual. 02-2024 ignores the City Planning Commission's notice of conditional final land development plan approval and acceptance of conditions for 213 College Avenue. The assessment of protected trees related to the development of taking place at 213 College Avenue occurred because of SALDO's Chapter 273, and the city's tree manual. The assessment involved a certified arborist and occurred on May 31st, 2022. The arborist inventoried 7 protected trees with values ranging from $18,000 to $115,520. The total appraised value of those 7 trees stood at $432,640. O2-2024 gives no consideration to the dollar value of a protected tree. It gives no consideration to the owner's loss of property. It robs a community of value placed on a shared asset. It imposes no consequences on tree work that kills trees. It burdens the owner with the cost of the tree work. O2-2024 emerged as a topic at the meeting of the Public Works Committee all of 22 days ago. It got a first reading 2 weeks ago, followed by questions and requests for a delay of action and further discussion. An inventory that counted alleged trespass trees subject to O2-2024 found 65 trees that allegedly trespassed onto neighboring properties bordered by College, Walnut, West End, and Buchanan. 100 more trees allegedly trespassed onto backyards and side yards of blocks bordered by Chestnut, Mary, Walnut, and Elm. 5 days ago, the city administration issued a memo intended to state the case and clarify issues regarding the proposed modifications to the city's tree ordinance. The memo was answered 2 days later by the attorney representing a property owner defending the alleged trespass trees bordering 213 College Avenue. The letter concluded, the city administration is simply surrendering the demands of a single project developer and is throwing out all protections for historic trees to make that development more profitable. I urge council to pause action on O2-2024. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hannigan, thank you.
If I may, President, I wanted to ask, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, a question. So what you're, according to what was read, can you clarify the local ordinance can go against the state law? Is that what you were trying to state?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm stating. Actually, that is what Attorney Winkle is stating, who is a licensed, seasoned real estate attorney in Lancaster County. He is telling you that what Mr. Campbell is saying is completely false, and that city ordinance can actually go and absolutely go against state law. So for you to even consider this vote is absolutely ridiculous.
If I may, President, I would like to take an action to table this, to consult with the city solicitor.
Councilor Diaz has made a motion to table the bill this evening. Is there a second? Is there a second? I do not have a second for that motion, Councilor Diaz. I'm sorry about that.
With that said, then I will definitely not be supporting this ordinance because I am not going to take a fall in the court of law.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Please go right ahead.
David Longenecker, 500 block of West Chestnut Street. There's no way I would ever be able to more eloquently state what needs to be said than what Ms. LaGrassa said, but I just want to point some things out. I've lived along West Chestnut Street for 30 years. I've lived in the neighborhood the remainder of my life. Just on my way here tonight, I passed by 2 tree stumps, one in the 500 block and one in the 400 block, each one less than half a block away from where the mayor resides. And as I understand it, there are specific things in the tree ordinances now that require those tree stumps to be removed and trees replanted. Also, on my way here tonight, I passed by at least 5 street lamps that were either not illuminated or were flickering. And I just have to wonder aloud how a public works director can be focused on taking down trees in what's considered a Tree City USA when basic amenities such as street lamps go unrepaired chronically. And this is just along 4 blocks of West Chestnut Street, I'll remind you. This project and the enforcement of the existing ordinances and legislation on the books has led to the discharge of a very competent, capable, and valued city employee who I worked with for several years during my time as fire marshal for this city. And it proves to me, beyond any reasonable doubt, that if this legislation goes through, that gentleman was inappropriately discharged. And I would think that he would have a great deal of legal precedent on his side to take the city's money, which really isn't the city's money, it's the taxpayers' money. So I would expect you to very carefully consider tabling this proposal, as Mrs. Diaz has suggested, and get some further clarification and ask some hard questions of a public works director who hasn't figured out how to change light bulbs yet. Thank you.
Are there any additional public comments on the bill this time?
I really think that everyone should think about this very clearly. If this is a way of breaking the law and it comes back at us, you should really...
pay those fines.
Both. Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Any additional council comments? Thank you. Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam President. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Roy.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Mr. Craddock.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Nay.
Mr. Hirsch.
Aye.
President Big.
Aye.
That's what ethics complaints are for with the Attorney General's office.
Absolutely.
And corruption complaints, actually. No, Janet, actually, she voted no, but.
We do have additional items on the agenda, so if you are exiting the room, I would just ask that you do so at this time. Again, resolution number 11 will not be taken up at this evening's meeting, will be brought forward to council at a later time. We now move into our public comment period, our second public comment period, open for comment on issues that were not previously on the agenda this evening. Duration of comments is limited to 3 minutes, and please begin with your name and block of residence for the meeting record. If there's anyone wishing to make public comment, please come forward at this time. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. My name is Jeremy Countess. I live in the 100 block of South Duke Street in the city's Old Town community, and I am a board member of Neighborhoods of Old Town Association, also known as NEWT. My comments this evening relate to the proposed Church Street project. We oppose the destruction of our historic brick sidewalks. We oppose the creation of a shared pedestrian bike path. This path will be dangerous to both pedestrians and bikers, a view shared by the city's biking community. We oppose the creation of a 7 to 14-foot wide green buffer with grass, trees, and benches between the traveled lane and the shared pedestrian bike path. It is unlikely that the green buffer will be maintained by the city, or that the shared pedestrian bike path will receive street sweeping or snow plowing operations by the city. And in that regard, I'm reminded of the comments earlier this evening by the young gentleman who complained about the icy bike paths in the city. Many of these concerns were addressed in a resident submission last May to the city after the initial public hearing on this project. Apparently, that submission was completely ignored by the city's planners. More recently, 39 members of Old Town submitted their concerns to the Department of Public Works in a letter dated February 6, 2024. All members of City Council received a copy of that letter. Finally, we encourage you to review and consider the recent comments on the city's Engage Lancaster website in opposition to this project. It is time for City Council and the Department of Public Works to rethink this project and address our community's concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Countess, thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Miguel Tirado. 108 East Vine Street. It's in the corner of South Duke. and East Vine. I've been a resident of the city of Lancaster for 54 years. Graduated from John Pearson McCaskey High School in 1971. I'm here because I have seen all the changes, and I've been sitting over there listening to all these comments and patiently waiting for my turn. I'm here on behalf of the Southeast Quadrant and the neighborhood of Old Town. I've been living in the neighborhood of Old Town for 20 years. Quería hablar español, pero me hubiera gustado más hablar en español. Pero what I want to say is that I remember when I came here in 1969, and we used to sit down on when my sister moved to Conestoga Street in the corner of South Wayne and Church. We used to sit there and we will see the traffic jam that used to be on that traffic light. And we thought it was great, but I guess it was the vision of Mayor Scott, I think it was, maybe early 70s, that decided to open up Church Street and made it into like a four-lane highway like it is now. It is beautiful. So why would the city spend all this time and all the money to change that beautiful entrance of the city? The reason why it's like that is because they wanted to get the traffic out of the city. Now the traffic turn on Chesapeake, they turn on Gulf Road, but back in the old days, everyone would come right through the city. And remember, if you guys, I think all of you guys were probably in Pampers back then, but anyway, some of you were. But what I'm trying to say is that Church Street was a one-way street, one way. There were cars on the right-hand side, nothing over here. One lane. I remember because we had an accident like in the early 70s because back then it was to get a lot of snow, it was to get a lot of ice storms. It was dangerous. I remember I walked 2 years to McCaskey High. Anyway, but my point is that I am unanimously opposed on behalf of the Southeast Quadrant and on behalf of the neighborhood of Old Town. I am 100% unanimously disapprove of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Are there any additional public comment this evening?
Jim Morrissey, Washington Street. I'd like to follow up my earlier comments. Number one, I raised a lot of questions earlier, and I presented an email to all of you a lot of facts, not emotion, but facts that contradict some of the recommendations by the consultant. So what I'm asking is, will I ever get a reply? Will the other messages to you ever get replied to, such as the one on February 6th, signed by 39 residents? It seems like everything goes into a big black hole and never comes out of it when it comes to correspondence to the city council, and I'm so sorry that that's happening, as many of us are too. I think we're reaching a breaking point among the residents as to how much patience we really have with how we're being ignored. One last thing. I may be wrong about what I've just written to the president and then forwarded it to Bernie, that there's unequal administration of the 3-minute rule. So when you see my email, please, if I'm wrong, I'm welcome and open to being said I'm wrong, and you can counsel me and set me straight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll respond to that, Mr. Morris, if you'd like, because I do see your email in front of me. I believe you were referring to a member of CASA who was able to speak for longer, who was speaking on behalf of 2 individuals that wanted to make comment but needed translation service that would have made their comment significantly longer, or weren't otherwise able to be here tonight. She did contact me ahead of time, and I did make arrangements to allow her to speak on their behalf. And I should have said that before she started, and I did not. So that was the misunderstanding, and it was my prerogative to allow her to speak on behalf of 2 individuals, but even though she was one speaker.
Okay, well, I might want to discuss that further because I'm not sure I accept your explanation.
Are there further public comments this evening? I see Director Campbell. I see where, go right ahead, come right on up.
Am I going to get an answer to my other questions, by the way?
I think it'll take longer than this evening to do that, so. Sure. Good evening, thank you.
Hi, this is Susie Hoover, and I'm on East King Street. And I want to speak to the Church Street project as well. I actually did a very nice 4-page letter, and I went out and surveyed the whole area and the city on bike paths. And I think I sent it to Mr. Campbell and asked him to send it to Cindy McCormick, and he verified that he did do that, and I never received a response. And I actually took their figures that they used and created with the same dimensions a plan that would be much easier and satisfactory, and Old Town reviewed it. So I think that I asked, and they are applying for grant money to do that Church Street project. But I think for the character of Old Town, this is going to be disastrous, and I'm not for it. I just needed to say that very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover. Please come right up. I see Director Campbell. Thank you, Dr. Campbell.
Good evening. Thank you very much for letting me speak for just a moment. There's not much that I want to be able to say. One of the joys, but one of the challenges and often curses of having an open house that we believe was as successful as it was at the end of January is that one needs to filter and weigh a wide variety of comments on a host of projects. There were 4 projects as well as 2 other initiatives that were part of that open house effort. I think it was a wonderful opportunity for people to express their opinions, etc. And we have been not only receiving a lot of comments, pro and con. We've been hearing mostly about the con this evening, about not just the Church Street site, but several of the other sites as well. But I do want to remind people that the comment period still is open until the end of March. So what we are trying to do is trying to weigh the wide variety of comments. At that evening, we got a lot of very positive comments and a lot of comparisons of things that are happening in one project that could happen in another project. And there's a lot to be weighed with that. In an effort to try to respond to some of the more directive comments that came, we are starting to respond to some of those comments. I think we sent to you earlier this afternoon a response to one series of the comments related to the Church Street site. We're in the process of wrapping up a response that addresses many of the concerns that have been raised even this evening. In broad terms, without trying to preempt the other comments that are on the Engage website and the other comments that we received that evening. It's a very difficult thing to do, to try to weigh a wide variety of often diverse concerns, goals, hopes, wishes, and fears. And we're trying to do it. We're trying to be as open as possible. I do remind people again that the comment period for all of those sites that were at the open house is still open until March 31st. But I assure you that you're going to be receiving some preliminary response. You've received one already, and you'll be receiving another preliminary response, which will be distributed to the Newt community within the next couple of days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Campbell. Additional comments, please just come right on. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Joyce Callis. I'm at 133 South Duke Street in Old Town. I just want to comment that, the letter that went out a year ago was never responded to. That was a very preliminary, design a year ago. And when we saw the design again, it was exactly the same, and none of the things that were recommended, and there was no feedback. So a year went by. Now, I understand, Mr. Campbell, you go on the website and it says it's in this final design phase or something, and you're taking comments through March 31st, is it? But it also says on that website that this is a final design and that only minor changes will be considered. We're not talking about minor changes. A year ago, we talked about not ripping up the sidewalks, not putting this shared path. A year ago, it was ignored. So now it's gone a year later, and it says on the website, and maybe the website's wrong and someone should change it, but it says that you have till March 31st, but it's in the final design phase, and only minor changes will be accepted. And our requests are not minor, not at all. So we're kind of frantic because we're not hearing back again, same as a year ago, and we're seeing the clock ticking, and we're seeing that only minor changes are going to be allowed. That is not very encouraging to us, and that's why we're upset. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Callis. Are there any additional public comments this evening? Good evening.
Hello, Adriana Atencio, 100 block of East Ross Street. I also have the pleasure of serving as Executive Director of the Commonweal. I'd just like to comment really quickly about Church Street and the shared use path. So I have seen paths like these be very successful in other places, specifically in Indianapolis. They have a great cultural heritage trail that goes all throughout their city. It is miles long. It connects different trails that other parts of the city would love to see actually be built. Indianapolis happens to be a very, very large city that has incorporated suburbs into its actual kind of downtown to be a city that is much, much larger than Lancaster itself. But the magic about the cultural trail in Indianapolis is it's not just a trail where people can bike and also walk. It has a lot of wayfinding on it. It has a lot of art on it, and it becomes truly a cultural experience. It also has pavers that denote whether you should be biking on one side or walking on the other side. So I have advised Public Works that that's what I would really love to see on this trail, because if we're going to do it, we should do it well, and we should do it right. And this has been such a success in Indianapolis that it can really be a success here. And I hear what folks in Old Town are saying, but we also need to realize that change can be hard, but when it creates a better environment for all of us, we have to recognize that as well. So I would just encourage everybody to take a look at Indianapolis and see how that can be a roadmap for the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atencio. Additional comments?
Good evening. My comments are in response to the coalition report earlier. My name is Amos Stoltzfus. I live on the 100 block of South Arch Street. I'm also the SOE director for Tenfold. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to the council for your use of ARPA funds to support affordable housing projects, additional shelter beds, and the Prince Street Hub. These are critical investments that are desperately needed. I also want to share about some of the success that we're seeing at Culleton Park. Since last summer, a group of us, SOE residents, board members, volunteers, outreach workers, have been working to build trust and relationships with the folks who stay at Culleton. We've done this by treating them with dignity, respect, and recognizing them as neighbors. Through communication and collaboration with city staff, the police department, and nonprofit partners, we've helped people get into rehab, find jobs, access mental health services, and in a few cases, get housing. The situation at Culleton is by no means perfect, but together we're doing the best that we can. However, as we've noted earlier tonight by others, it's not enough. For every person we help, it feels like there are one or two who take their place. Across the country, many of the cities that are making progress in terms of homelessness are using our Housing First model. Here in our community, it feels like we have a Housing Last model. We expect our homeless brothers and sisters to somehow overcome addiction, figure out their mental health challenges, deal with past and current trauma, find and keep a job, all while living on the streets and in our parks and in our congregant shelters. And then maybe, if they're really lucky, they'll find housing. I recognize, as others have, that this issue is much bigger than Lancaster City, and I know that there are limitations to what the administration and council can do, but I'd ask for your help in 3 areas. Number 1, to take time to get to know your homeless constituents and help to share their stories. I guarantee that it'll change your perspectives, and it may help to change perspectives of others. Number 2, advocate for a county-wide strategic plan. I believe the coalition's current strategic plan is from 2019, which is before COVID, before the dramatic increase in housing prices and homelessness, and before the coalition moved to LCHRA. And then number 3, to use your platforms to push municipal, county, and state leaders to prioritize this issue, to make policy changes, and to provide funding for solutions. And if there's anything that I can do to help in any of those areas, I'm definitely ready to help. And if you're ever interested in meeting some of our neighbors at Culleton Park, you have an open invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoltzfus. Are there any additional public comments this evening? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment period. And we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the report of the mayor. Mayor Sirachi.
Thank you. Tonight, I would like to give a brief shout out to the Community Planning and Economic Development's Healthy Homes Office for their tremendous work with the critical repair program in recent months. In under 6 months, they were able to complete 17 projects totaling $125,000. This work, funded by our Community Development Block Grant funds, has such a profound and immediate impact on families, supporting essential repairs to roofs, HVAC systems, sewer systems, plumbing, and more. It is truly a way that we can model that the most affordable house is the one that you currently live in, and helping to protect our housing stock for generations to come. And those houses are all throughout the city, South Ann, North Reservoir, Prospect Street, South Marshall, Hamilton, Fremont, Christian, High, Strawberry Manor, East Fulton, 4th, and Laurel Streets, just to give some sense of where these projects were completed across the city. Also wanted to alert council to the upcoming parks planning workshops. We are in the process of creating our next Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. After a first round of engagement last spring, Public Works staff are embarking on the next round of gathering input. I'd like to invite residents to 2 upcoming workshops on March the 14th. One will be held at the Lancaster Science Factory on New Holland Avenue from 3 to 4:30, and the other at the Lancaster Rec Center at 525 Fairview Avenue from 5:30 to 7. The workshops will be opportunities for residents to talk about their parks, what physical improvements are needed, what types of programming or activities should occur, how can we improve parks that are due for significant upgrades. In that way, I'm thinking about parks like the Yule Gans Playground, South End Park, Reservoir Park, Joe Jackson Tot Lot. Some of these parks haven't been touched in many years. And we will be having specific meetings around these parks later in the spring, but we also just want to invite open feedback about what's missing from our park system. You can follow along with this process at engage.cityoflancasterpa.gov, and we encourage your participation. I also just want to make a note to the Newt neighbors that are here, I love your acronym, that you have given us a lot to think about, and I will apologize that you haven't had any feedback from the city to say that your letters have been received. I have read them. I know that they are being circulated among DPW staff, And that's on us to have not communicated that in the interim, and there will be more to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sirachi. The next item on our agenda is the report of the President of Council, and just a very brief one this evening. Just a reminder to residents, you would have in the last week likely received a large postcard in the mail reminding you or informing you that the survey is open for the Welcome Lancaster initiative. It's the beginning of our tourism master plan process, and our goal is to make sure that we bring residents into the conversation. I took the survey myself, and it was actually very thoughtful. The questions, it was lengthy. Give yourself 25 to 30 minutes to do it. But the questions were really thought-provoking and made me think about Lancaster in a different way than maybe I'm already thinking about it. So I would encourage everyone to do that. You can just go to welcomelancaster.com or follow the QR code or the postcard that you receive. It is imperative that we have a lot of participation from residents, business owners, stakeholders, visitors. We want to hear everyone's voice. So please participate in that. And that concludes my report. The next item on our agenda is council comments. Are there any council comments this evening?
If I may, President.
Councilor Diaz.
I just wanted to, the gentleman that was speaking from Tunfold, Amos? I just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing for the homeless, and also my friend over here, she's pretty quiet, sometimes she does speak. Real quickly, has there been any type of police sweeping at all? Are they feeling comfortable that, I'm just curious, because I mean, I go by there all the time, but I never really get the chance to stop.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Yeah, no, we've had, really great communication and collaboration with the police department over the last couple of months. And, if there are issues that need to be addressed, we're talking and trying to address them as a community. So there's been no kind of police action like that lately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by chance, do we know anything about the young lady that was pregnant, that
I believe she went in with families.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And please have them months.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Additional comments from council? Hearing none and having reached the conclusion of our agenda, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.